Carlos Doesn't Remember, a podcast that is literally a movie to your ears. Tells a story of a traumatized boy named Carlos who comes from a low-income and unprivileged family in Lenox. He is very smart, extremely smart, who is trying to get a college scholarship. Gladwell, who is the maker of this podcast, uses devices that engage the listener, such as various forms of imagery throughout the podcast itself. Transition music to also add the ambiance and suspense to build throughout the podcast. And multiple first-person accounts which help drive the story home. He really learned to utilize ethos, pathos, and logos, referencing facts through people who personally have been through it. He especially took advantage of pathos by conveying the realism of this story through other people's perspectives, thus making connections with the listener. Gladwell continuously exceeds expectations by using these devices to really engage the listener, and by really using this music, different forms of it throughout, to kind of separate his voice from the others' first person accounts, really does make a difference and really makes the listener understand more, because unlike a movie, you can't really visualize who is talking, and it is something that I believe Gladwell used quite well. Gladwell uses the voices at also very strategic times. He anytime that a personal story needed to be told or a question needed to be asked by Gladwell that needed to be answered, that is when he utilizes the voices of people like Carlos or Carlos's sister. He uses this form of suspense and the reality of the story with the transition music makes it much more real than if it was just simply him talking over a story about Carlos without the voices or without the music. It would be much more dry, and it would be really hard for the listener to really grasp what Gladwell is trying to convey here, which is a very strong message, by the way. There's been a lot of people in Lenox, which is just an example of unprivileged low-income students who actually exceed the 90th percentile of every assignment or every SAT that they take, but are not accepted into college or are not even looked at for university because of the money that they need to get in. In the story, they talk about scholarships and how apparently the admissions officers increased the amount of low-income students that they're accepting and giving scholarships to. They gave out 15, from what I believe. Gladwell talked about it in around 10 minutes and 15 seconds within the podcast, and how they actually lied about it, because the admissions officer said there wasn't a lot of low-income, very intelligent people in Lenox, but in fact there was about 34,000, I believe, which was quite crazy to think about. How they can write people off just because of simply their economic status and not the value of what their minds possess. Now, in conclusion, Carlos Doesn't Remember is a very methodically thought out podcast that really latches on to the listener and piques their curiosity to make them want to continue listening. This is what a podcast should do. But in conclusion, I hope you guys do enjoy, and I also hope you guys check out the podcast for yourself. I'm going to try not to spoil anything else. But anyway, guys, I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.